With me today, I have Helen Yu, and we're going to talk on this episode of 22nd Century Management with Ken. We're going to talk about the business startup process. Now, Helen is the founder and CEO of Tygon Advisory. She drives growth for tech companies from startups to global titans like Oracle and Adobe, and helps CEO achieve multi-billion-dollar revenue growth and record profitability. So she knows what she's talking about. So Helen, let me throw this to you, and you want to tell us a little more about your background?
Sure, Ken. It's such a pleasure being here today with you. Thank you for the warm introduction. I actually started my career as an accountant and financial analyst. My curiosity and learning agility got me where I am today. I learned to code as a Hyperion consultant, went on to design and implement 400 plus financial planning applications, working alongside with mainly the CFOs. And then I run an Oracle BI consulting practice post-acquisition with the added pleasure of learning from then Oracle EVP of Sales, Keith Block. Under his tutelage, I learned the nuances of enterprise solution sales at Oracle. And then I learned marketing and SaaS at Adobe, and then successfully led the startup to scale up challenge at Marketo. So my journey really led me to recognize the critical gap patterns in growth-driven technology startups, prompting me to become an entrepreneur of a startup accelerator. I'm currently actually an interim head of services at an insurtech called Brightcore. So I provide fractional CXO service to startups since 4 years ago.
Wow. So it sounds like you're a busy young woman.
I am indeed.
Okay, so let me start with this question. What prompted you to write Ascend Your Startup, Conquer the 5 Disconnects to Accelerate Growth?
So the why behind ascending Mount Everest was to keep a sacred promise to my grandmother. That was to leave her ashes on the tall mountain. I felt unstoppable. I made up my mind that nothing would hold me back from my climb. So my destination started out not on any map, but in my mind. Making the decision to write Ascending Your Startup was no different, right? I felt it was yet another way to honor the grit and resilience grandma taught growing up, and then honor the great resilience it takes to scale a startup.
Okay, well, very nice. So in your book, you talk about the effort involved in climbing a mountain and the task you're given. So you talked about the task. Do you think that same sense of purpose is really important for a startup?
So no question about it, right? The why is so critical, because without a sense of purpose, a founder's journey is empty, or worse, can go awry, right? Purpose gives us a destination, and then also the motivation to achieve our goal to reach our destination.
Okay, and I agree with that. I have been through the process of starting up several companies, never to the scale of the companies you've worked in. I had a copier dealership. I run a travel agency twice now in my life. So I've done a lot of small things. And I would say that having that sense of purpose is a key piece of it, because one of the things, and I'm sure you found this when you were, thinking about climbing Mount Everest, was that if you don't have that sense of purpose, it would be just so easy to stop, because when you hit these roadblocks, these obstacles, because anybody that thinks starting a business is easy, I would think again, even owning a business. It was funny. I had friends that thought because I owned my own business that my life was so nice. And I told them, what you don't understand is once you start a business, it's like grabbing hold of a tiger by both ears. At that point in time, once you have those ears in your hand, you're pretty much going to go where the tiger wants to go until you get things calmed down and tamed.
That's such an important point you made, Ken, because I have to say, for a very long time, I did not know what my purpose was, right? All I knew was to make my grandmother proud. But that's okay, right? My point here is not all the time you'll know where you're heading toward, but there's what matters to you. You always know what matters to you at that moment in time. And then our purpose shift, right, from time to time. It depends on what life stage you're at. As long as you constantly revisit that, making sure what you're doing every day still matters or aligned with what matters to you. And so that's so critical. And then sometimes, as I mentioned in the book, you have to take a step back in order to move forward. That's really critical to constantly look at where exactly you want to go, why, and then align what you do day to day with that purpose.
Yeah, again, and I think that being able to back up sometimes is really important as well, because I think that sometimes we can start driving forward and we run into a little bit of roadblock, and it's by backing up and finding, and getting a little creative and finding your way around it is really important. Let me ask you another question here. Do you think that there's a certain kind of people that are tailor-made in terms of drive and temperament to run a startup and to be successful?
I wish we figured that out. Otherwise, it wouldn't. We know 90% of startups fail. However, here are a few characteristics of successful startup founders that I've worked with. Right, they thrive on a strong sense of personal self-efficacy to execute their vision, and they have keen eyes for innovation to identify some new products or new markets. Many of them are great listeners. As a matter of fact, they turn the idea into actionable insights, and then they articulate their vision super well. They also inspire devotion in others. And then their risk tolerance level is so much higher, right? Their motivation for achievement is stronger. If you look at Elon Musk of the world, Tim Cook, they're very different. They have different personalities, but they have things in common, right? They're all risk takers. They absolutely understand, where to go, and then be able to rally up the support, across the organization to help them achieve their goals.
And I would agree with that. I think that a piece of it too is the just this curiosity to see if there's not a better way to do something.
Yes.
I think that you've got to be willing to challenge the status quo. Elon Musk is a perfect example.
Yes.
He wasn't the first person to invent an electronic vehicle. Other people had electric cars.
Yeah.
But he was the one that figured a way to make it work. And, you think about his space program.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, why can't I do that?
Yeah.
And then he did.
I watched a video, interview of him, right? SpaceX failed 3 times. Most people would have quit at that moment. He continued, right, to go on, and he understood why it failed. He said the engineer, right, he wasn't able to hire the best, engineer. He had to be his own chief engineer. And he said, if he had an opportunity to hire someone in a better caliber, he could have succeeded quicker. But then he continues to press on. Same with Tesla, right? There was moments he would sleep in the factory to make things work. When he ran out of funding, most people would have stopped at that point. He pressed on, right? So the kind of tolerance level is much higher, right? These people, their risk tolerance level is much higher. They continue to pursue their dreams, knowing how hard it is. Starting a business is not an easy thing. It's not always like glamorous as you see they're up on the stage, but it's tons of hard work and on a daily basis, and their hardship that they all go through at certain moment as along the journey. And then they have the people, not just themselves, the people who they trust, work with them along the way to achieve those goals.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that. In fact, you were talking about the Elon Musk failing 3 times, and I think in hindsight he wouldn't even necessarily admit that he failed 3 times, but he's learned 3 things that didn't work. I love a quote about Thomas Edison. Somebody asked him about failing 1,000 times on the light bulb or 10,000 times, whatever the number was. He said, I didn't fail. He just said, I learned all these things that didn't work. Mm-hmm. And I think that in the startup process, especially in the early stages, as you start to bring product to market, or as you start to try to roll out products and service, you're going to find things that you try that don't work, and you can't let that stop you. You just have to figure out, okay, how could I have done this better? What could I change to make it work, and to keep driving forward that way?
if to that point, Ken, if every time every experiment works, that means you haven't tried enough. You have not innovated enough, right? You got to really embrace the different way of thinking, the new way of thinking, to push yourself and stretch yourself so that you can be different. You can set yourself apart from your competition. That's what the mindset of many of them, like successful entrepreneurs, share. That's how what really, really get them out there being one of the best in the world.
It's interesting because the lack of that willing to take risks, I think, is one of the things that causes companies to stagnate and poses a challenge for, not necessarily legacy businesses, but businesses that are, that have existed for a while. They kind of get into a rut. I use this term a lot, but they get into this rut and they can't get out of it. They just keep doing what they've been doing.
Exactly.
I worked for a couple of bigger companies, and I would go in, and I tend to be, the entrepreneur in me shows up even when I'm in somebody else's business, and I'm like, well, why can't we fix this, and why can't we do this, and I get these, no, this is how we do things, and I'm like, oh, I need out of here quickly, because it was very hard to work when you have an entrepreneurial mindset. It's very hard to work for somebody that is not willing to take a little bit of risk and try to grow and change.
That's exactly what Elon Musk said during his interview, right? The reason he is where he's at today is that he was, turned down by all the companies he applied for the job, could not get in. So I treat every single challenge as an opportunity, right? That's the mindset, as you mentioned. The mindset is so critical, and many companies are, big brand, and they disappear in the newer century, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I tend to work and help in the copier industry, and it's interesting because we're at a point in time, you could say it's one of those critical junctures in time where the typewriter industry went through it, and there were dealers that were typewriter dealers that vanished. There were typewriter dealers that became something else.
Absolutely.
And I think in the copier industry, it's reached that stage of maturity, and there's some outside forces that are affecting it. And I think the dealers that survive are the dealers that are going to say, hey, we got to be different, do different, because if we keep doing what we're doing, we'll be gone.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So in your book, you divided the journey of a startup into camps. So can you talk about these different camps and how your mountain climb in 2007 made you think this way?
So there are actually 3 different camps, right? I want to give reader the bigger picture of their journey, because that is what the startup is, a journey. Each person who reads the book is at a different point of that journey. So I talk about 3 camps. The first camp is how you turn the idea into product camp. And then the second camp is how do you move from a product, get a product to market. And then the third camp is how do you really take a market to scale. So those are the 3 camps. When, think about when I climb the Mount Everest, you can't go from base camp all the way to the summit, right? What you do, you go from base camp to summit 1, there are a total of 5 summit, and then you reverse back to the base camp, then you go to camp 2, then you back to base camp again. So that process is called acclimate, right? You acclimate to get yourself used to the high elevation and then the climate environment. So what that means that sometimes in order for, this is I would say the base camp is profound marker to remind us, sometimes in order for you to move forward, you have to take a step back, right? So my climb really inspired me to give each founder a decision framework to scale faster and more fearlessly by paralleling that journey up their mountain. It's not easy to climb thousands of feet in the air and battle severe weather conditions or slippery slopes, unforeseen emergencies, right? The startup journey is no different. In both cases, you have to take this climb one section at a time, but then most importantly, celebrate one milestone at a time, make progress one goal at a time with the right people and team. So this is not about, hey, how do I write a pitch deck book? You can go Google, you can find those. This is about, as you go through the 3 camps, what are the questions you ask, right? What are the kind of thinking process you have to really make sure as you go through the first camp, you have to think about, why you're on this journey, what problem you're trying to solve, right? And then who else is there solving the same problem, or who is your target, ideal customer profile, and do they care about the problem you're solving? So all these questions you have to ask yourself, and then for you to really have more structured way of thinking and scale faster.
Okay, and I love that because it's interesting. I have a YouTube channel that's on travel, and I just attended some training recently, and one of the questions they said is, what are the questions your audience is thinking about? What are the challenges they face? And can you answer just those questions? Because it's real easy to fall in love with a product or an idea or a process and it not really match what your customer's looking for, what your customer wants or needs or would use.
Yeah, to that point, Ken, many of the founders, as they're brilliant. They understand the product super well, but they may not understand the process of the people, right? That's where they need to hire a Sherpa. I call Sherpa. I hired a Sherpa along the way to climb in Mount Everest Base Camp. But then you not only, right, we all know defining the minimum viable product is so critical, MVP, everybody knows that term, but then what's most important, how do you come up, define who the minimum viable team is and minimum viable culture needs to be for you to achieve the minimum viable repeatability? That's where you can start scaling the business. Not easy to be said than done, but that's super critical, right? So this is why, this book, guide you to ask what kind of question to ask once I get to that camp and to think through, right, kind of decision framework, and then allows you to make sure, hey, I don't miss these major things. Disconnect really means a blind spot. We all have blind spot. When you're driving as a motorcycle right by you, your entire attention as the driver is look for other cars, but you may have missed a motorcycle, cycler, or pedestrian. So that's where you have to think through, right? If you keep reminding yourself, let's make sure I look around, make sure I don't miss any motorcycler or pedestrian, you'll do much better as a driver.
I would agree 100% with that. And it's interesting because you talk about scale. One of the challenges that I see in the space that I work in a lot is that to really scale the business, the entrepreneurs got to eventually be willing to turn loose of the reins. And in some cases, that is so hard for them to do. They really become the roadblock in their own company's growth. Do you see that?
I definitely have seen that. Sometimes they become the roadblock to their own growth, partly because they don't know what they don't know, right? If you think about a lot of the founders, every founder wanted to grow and faster. If they know, I'll give you an example. When I climbed the base camp, 200 people set out for that journey that day. Only 3 made it. And then a lot of people dropped, right? I was a mile away from the flagpole right there, but I couldn't see it was only a mile away at the time. And I was not sure that the weather condition was like, really late in the day, getting really dark. In the mountain, high mountain environment, you are putting yourself at risk, right? Yeah. At that moment is the exact decision you have to make. Do I turn back from here or I continue? So I set a goal for myself. I said, I'm going to try 1 more hour to see where it's going to get me. And I was really lucky, right? And I think the mile, it's only a mile away. I made it. I was able to see the flagpole from distance, not to like 45 minutes later, I was able to see that. But many people turn around at that moment, right? And then have they known if among those, let's say 100 people, they all know only 1 mile away, I would bet you half of them will continue on the journey. They would not have turned back and then not to complete that trip, right? So that's just an example. In the startup world, the same. As a founder, you don't know. A lot of times there's blind spot. You don't know who you can trust and where to hire the people to be able to come here to help you with. And that's, you have to constantly make decision without all the data point you need. and then you're under the pressure, right? That the investor will push you or pressure you to achieve the result, but then you may not have all the resources and funding to do what you need to do, and you have to constantly make executive decision. And along the way, sometimes the one wrong decision put you off, right?
Yeah.
Significantly. That's where the risk is, and that's why it's so critical for you to uncover some of these disconnects along the way early, to think through it, right? If I were going to go, my goal is to drive the growth by 20%. What does that take? What kind of business model I need, and financials I need, the resources I need, and the culture I have to build, and then product. How do I make sure my MVP is aligned with customer demand? And then if you know all those upfront, your success chance is much higher.
Yeah, I think that's a critical piece of it. Now, let's talk about customer centric for a minute, because people talk about building, that customers come first, and there's a lot of talk in the world in general, in business, about taking care of the customer, but that seems to be a buzzword more than an action in a lot of parts of lots of companies. So how can a startup really become customer centric?
Yeah, you're right on. I think every company agrees it's important to be customer centric, but how to get there, and to me, is like, how do they even measure customer centricity, right? So the key is to find some insights into your customer, right? And I would say start off with understanding a deeper understanding of your existing customer base, right? Most of the companies you have, regardless if you have 10 customers, 100 or 1,000, you need to understand why your customer invest in you in the first place, what is, their use cases are, and then talk about how much, right? They understand how much they spend on your solution, and understand how well they've adopted your solution, and then what triggers the adoption, right? And then what's the user persona? Is it CMO, CEO, or CIO, whatever that is? Or, what is the list of the upsell, cross-sell opportunity by customer that you have? Understand the strengths of your product and weakness, and then the opportunities, right? Also understand who are your competitions at least, and then not only the solution you offer, but also the adjacent, right, additional opportunities. Also, who are your competitions, right? And then also understand what are the integration or solution they have, and how do you fit into their entire ecosystem. That information is so valuable for you to drive the repeatability, right? And then you also need to understand who does your account team interact with, and do you have a relationship with our executive decision makers, and then what is the NPS for your customers? All those information will help you determine how you build the repeatability, right? I think this may come as a surprise, but measuring customer centricity doesn't just start with your customer, it starts internally with the employee experience. How well you train or enable your employee has a profound impact on their, how they interact with their customer. And then if they're happy, their interaction will be reflected with their the customer experience. So it's so critical to make sure you have the right people on the team, make sure they're enabled, make sure they're happy, so that throughout the interaction with the customer, right, overall. And lastly is to leverage the existing customer success, right? I would say that making sure that you don't, if you take a customer go live and successful go live, you share that story with your marketing team, making sure they leverage that as an asset to drive repeatable sales. Leverage that, sales team can leverage that in the go-to-market cycle to continue to drive the success.
And along those lines, the one thing I think that too many companies don't look at, because a lot of times, you hear these people that talk about their net promoter scores, and they brag about a lot of things. I think that a lot of times companies wind up asking fluff questions so they get really good net promoter scores. And I'm a fan of asking the hard questions, because I think that the real strength and the real potential for growth comes from understanding what your customers don't like about your product, why they didn't buy from you, what went wrong if they were an existing customer and they left, what went wrong that caused them to leave? Because I think it's that in-depth understanding of the pain points of your customers in dealing with you gives you the most opportunity to fix those things. Understanding what the customers like is nice, but I think it's understanding what they don't like is vital to the long-term success.
That is so critical, Ken. For every customer who decide to leave you, you don't just let them go. You should have a conversation with them to understand exactly why they left, and then really do an analysis, right? Analyzing, for all the customer who churned or customer you lost in the deal, right, to your competition, and what triggered their decision. That's how you can make it much better, and then you can improve either product or your services or your go-to-market messaging, everything, right? All these are really relevant. So you also have to ask yourself the question, what is your organizational strengths, right? What are the desired business outcome, applying those strengths? Because you cannot go after every single opportunity out there. You should have more of a focused effort on, ICP, I talk about ideal customer profile, making sure that that's aligned with your product roadmap, aligned with the core competency your company offers. And then what does that mean to each of the function, right? For service organization, your marketing, your operations, and then how do you make sure that you align your strategic resources accordingly? And then you also want to make sure that where you need to add more resources to bridge some of the gaps as you flush out some of the gaps. And then what about your competitors? What about the market readiness? So there's many things factors you have to take into consideration. This sounds simple, but quite complex. But you always start small, right? You pilot that, you test out. You have a small a scenario. You think about, okay, I pilot with this customer. Let me just work with one customer. And then once you figure out a pattern, is there any other customers like this similar, right? If I fail, then maybe we should not go after this type of customers at all, right? But then if you have success elsewhere, let's just focus on our energy on those successful scenarios and customer profile. Then you can start seeing the repeatability and gaining more traction to scale.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with it. Let me ask you one final question here. What advice would you give startup founders right now in this business climate? Are things different than they were 10 years ago? And is it harder or easier to found a new company and get out there?
Wow, that's $1 million question. I have to say, understand why the challenge in front of you exists, right? Because all of us are in different stage of growth, and then we run into different challenges. It depends on where you're at with your company, where you're at with your team, and then as well as the personal journey, and then the root cause, right? Take the time to understand the root cause. Don't just scratch on the surface, and then understand what it takes to overcome. Is it funding related issue or resource competency, or is the market is not ready, right? I say this, Google was the number 12 internet company or search company, right? Apple, when they created iPad, it was a number 12, similar or something. So you don't have to be the first one in the market to be successful, but you need to be the one that really making sure you're out there when the market is ready. You need to be you need to be there in the market in the right time and when the market is ready. So it's so critical for you to understand the market dynamic, understand your competition. There are many other factors, and then also you got to evaluate the investor. Don't just jump in, go with any investor. You have to make sure you find investor who really understand your business, passionate about your business. Same with the team members, right? If you're all have a shared really goal, and then that worth so much more than just a product solution. And take the time to understand people and process, right? Not just so jazzed about the product. If you lock yourself into the lab all the time, and then you got to walk out of the lab to listen to your customers, really expand your horizon to read and then learn more from others who are successful, talk to others, build a stronger network to grow your network, and then to grow your knowledge, and then to really embrace some of the different opinions. And then that's how you, I would say, you can be successful. Life is a constant parade of changes, right? It is founder's job to assess the landscape and find the challenges and overcome them.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Listen, Helen, it's been so nice having you on today. We'll say goodbye to the folks, and we'll chat for a minute afterwards. By the way, on LinkedIn, in the description of the broadcast today, there are a link to the book. There's a link to Helen's social media information, so you can connect with her. If you're watching this on YouTube, same information is there, and it'll also be on the audio version. So wherever you're consuming this podcast, you'll have the opportunity to take to reach out to Helen and to connect with her and to find her book, so that you can learn about the startup process if you're thinking about it. And there's a lot of fun in having your own business. I can say that. There's just also a lot of challenges. Yeah. So thanks for being with us today, and we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Oh, it was a great pleasure having you on, Ellen.